Since ancient times, when the world was still immersed in chaos, the gods in the heavens felt that eternity was boring. With a desire to seek something new in the mortal world, they descended from their sacred temples to enter the human world. To blend into mortal life, they decided to seal all their divine powers, choosing a life full of inconveniences and countless surprises. They accepted giving up their unparalleled powers to fully experience both the joys and sorrows of humanity. However, to protect their people from the dangers of monsters rising from the dungeons, the gods bestowed power upon them through blessings. In return, the recipients would become loyal members of the familia led by the deities. Bel Cranel, a young rookie who had just joined the ranks of adventurers, was the only member of the goddess Hestia's familia. A goddess without fame or reputation, with no one else following her. During an excursion into deeper levels beyond the safety limit, he was accidentally hunted by a minotaur, a gigantic creature with a muscular body and superior strength. In the moment close to death, a blonde female warrior with a sword glowing like moonlight descended from the sky, easily defeating the monster. In an instant, the minotaur roared in pain before turning to dust, leaving behind a sparkling purple magic stone lying on the blood-soaked battlefield. From that moment, Bel's young heart beat erratically. He was not only attracted by her cold beauty, but also admired the extraordinary strength of the female swordsman. Returning from the dungeon covered in blood, Bel made everyone at the Adventurers Guild laugh. Many called him a foolish rookie who didn't know his limits. Even Ina, his guild advisor, was shocked when she saw his condition. After hearing the whole story, she couldn't stop scolding him for his reckless action. Going alone to the 5th floor, a place full of dangers that not every new guild member could survive and return from. Although angry, Ina couldn't hide her relief knowing Bel had returned intact. She advised him to take care of himself and never repeat such a foolish act when so many people worried about him. When Bel carefully asked about his savior, Ina revealed it was Ys Wallenstein, a legendary swordswoman from the Loki familia. At level 5, she was currently one of the strongest warriors in Arario City, who had been given the title of Sword Princess for her glorious achievements. Nevertheless, what Bel cared about wasn't just her strength or title. He was curious about more ordinary things, like what food she liked, if she had close friends, or if she was interested in anyone. Unfortunately, Ys was still single, but her status was so high that approaching her seemed nearly impossible for Bel, a new inexperienced adventurer who belonged to an unknown familia like Hestia's. Ina sighed, saying that girls are usually attracted to those who can protect them. If Bel wanted to be noticed, the only way was to become stronger. Just leaving the guild, Bel's mood was still troubled. He quickly returned to the small dwelling he shared with the goddess Hestia. As soon as he entered, she embraced him tightly, her face full of worry after hearing he had nearly lost his life in the dungeon. Hestia hurriedly checked Bel all over to make sure he wasn't seriously injured. To her, he wasn't just her only follower, but also her only companion in this mortal world. Bel knelt down, expressing his deep gratitude and promising that he would never leave her alone. Although Hestia was a deity not widely known, she always tried to make a living through exhausting part-time jobs to provide modest meals for Bel. Despite the difficult life, she never complained. If she were allowed to use her divine powers, things would surely be simpler. Nevertheless, the choice was made by her in the past. Now, she could only believe in Bel's determination. Although he was still young and lacked experience, she believed this was just the beginning. Once they overcame the initial hardships, the future would certainly be much brighter. During the status check ritual, Hestia felt deeply moved when she realized how lucky she was to have met a kind-hearted boy like Bel. Looking at the boy, the goddess couldn't help but think that someone as simple and shy as Bel would find it difficult to capture the heart of a strong and beautiful swordswoman like Ys Wallenstein, who always shone like a star on the battlefield. According to Hestia, Bel's ability to pick up a girl in the dungeon was just a far-fetched dream, because he was just like a weed growing by the roadside, not worth looking at in a forest full of brilliant flowers. After completing the ritual, Hestia showed Bel the newly updated stats. All parameters had grown steadily, accurately reflecting his efforts throughout the long day of relentless fighting. However, magic remained stagnant, showing no change. The strange thing was in the skill section, which was usually empty but now appeared to have a glitch, making it impossible to display clear information. This made Bel feel disappointed. But for Hestia, she realized that something special was happening. After some analysis, she discovered that Bel possessed an extremely rare skill called Lyris Freeze Release Phrase. This ability worked based on the emotions within the owner's heart. As long as he maintained his motivation and burning belief, this skill would continuously promote exceptional development of his body. The more intense the feelings, the more apparent the progress. Although filled with joy witnessing this beginning, Hestia couldn't hide a hint of silent jealousy that Belle's transformation originated from another girl instead of her. The new day began with a rather awkward situation. Belle woke up in a state of confusion when he realized his body was pressed against Hestia's round bosom, making his face turn red like a tomato. On the way to the dungeon, the feeling of being watched made him cautious. While still pondering, a girl suddenly appeared, holding the magic stone he had dropped yesterday. After bowing his head in gratitude, Belle was asked why he was going to the dungeon so early. Before he could answer, his hungry stomach betrayed him, forcing him to accept the meal that Sir Flova generously shared. Although initially hesitant, Belle finally took it, exchanging it for a promise to visit the tavern where she worked for dinner tonight. All day fighting in the dungeon, Belle constantly thought about how much effort he needed to catch up with Aiza's shadow. While engrossed in his inner struggle, the dungeon suddenly spawned new monsters. Although he intended to retreat, the image of that girl appeared in his mind, making Belle summon all his courage to charge into battle, claiming victory with his own strength. When he returned, Belle could hardly believe seeing his stats grow exceptionally. The rapid advancement made him wonder. However, when he asked Hestia about it, she just snapped an irritated response and put on her coat to leave, with the excuse of going drinking with colleagues. Despite her cold words, Hestia was actually tormented by feelings of jealousy. She couldn't accept that someone she valued so much was changing so rapidly because of another girl. In the goddess's heart, Belle should rightfully be hers alone. That evening, as promised, Belle went to the hostess of Fertility Tavern. Sir cheerfully welcomed him and introduced herself as an employee there. The tavern owner appeared surprised to see an adventurer with such an innocent face. Because Belle was Sir's friend, she generously brought out a special dish, but charged quite a high price, which almost choked Belle. Sir just smiled with pleasure because today there would be extra income. When everything was still peaceful, a group of adventurers from the Lv1 Familia unexpectedly entered, making the atmosphere in the tavern a bit lively. Aiza appeared with her usual calm demeanor, making Belle unable to take his eyes off her. He kept watching her from afar without daring to approach. Meanwhile, Pateloga, a member of the group, after drinking too much, started mocking a weak person who had been chased by a minotaur. He insinuated that Belle was a burden, trash unworthy of existing beside someone like Aiza. This public insult was like a knife stabbing into Belle's self-esteem, causing him to quietly leave the tavern with a heavy heart. Unable to let weakness linger, Belle once again plunged into the dungeon, frantically defeating monsters as if wanting to release all the resentment weighing on his heart. He knew he could no longer hope in vain. The only way was to continuously strive, not waiting for miracles to be able to walk alongside that girl. As dawn broke, Hestia stood anxiously in front of the house, suddenly discovering Belle dragging his tired steps, covered in blood, clothes tattered. She hurriedly ran to embrace him, continuously checking his condition. Nevertheless, Belle just gave a light smile and whispered that he wanted to become even stronger. After a night of battling monsters in the dungeon, Belle returned with an exhausted body covered in blood, but also carrying an extraordinary change. His strength parameters suddenly increased in an unbelievable way, a phenomenon unprecedented in the development history of rookie adventurers. It was all thanks to the special skill he possessed. Lyris Freeze Release Phrase, a rare type of ability capable of reflecting power based on the subject's intense emotions. And that source of motivation was none other than the image of Aiza Wallenstein, the cold swordswoman belonging to the Lv1 Familia, who had deeply engraved herself in his mind from their first encounter. However, for Hestia, the goddess who cared for him, this caused her heart to ache. She realized that the reason for Belle's rapid progress stemmed from another girl, not herself. Although feeling jealous, she remained silent, not revealing the truth about this special skill to Belle, because she feared that if people knew, he would become the target of other greedy gods. To keep him safe, from now on, Hestia decided not to print the status on paper as before, but would notify him directly to avoid information leakage. Under Hestia's worried gaze, Belle clearly showed his determination to continue moving forward. He not only wanted to become stronger to stand beside the girl of his dreams, but also wanted to prove to the world that he deserved the trust the goddess had placed in him. In response, Hestia solemnly asked him to promise that he would not recklessly rush into danger. as she feared more than anything that one day she would be left alone in this mortal world. After committing with all his heart, Bel continued his journey. The next day, he went to the tavern to apologize for running away the previous night. The tavern owner, accustomed to the slipperiness of adventurers, didn't expect that this young man had enough courtesy to come back and admit his fault. Thanks to Sir, the gentle maid who spoke up for him, Bel was forgiven and even given an extra boxed meal. The sincere advice from the adults in the tavern made him more reflective. Those who survive in the dungeon don't need to care what others think. Just returning safely is a great victory. That night, the festival gathering the gods was held grandly at a luxurious mansion. In that bustling scene, the appearance of the goddess Freya made many eyes follow her. However, the person Hestia was wary of was none other than Loki, her arch-rival in both power and bust size. The argument between the two goddesses with completely opposite styles quickly erupted, no different from two children fighting over a prize. Especially when Loki was asked about eyes, her reaction only made Hestia more certain that the path Bel had chosen was not easy. Meanwhile, Bel, though not present at the party, was diligently training. Passing by equipment shops, he couldn't help but be attracted by the fine weapons others used. Although he had no money to buy, he still bowed his head to apologize to the god Hephaestus for staring without intending to make a transaction. That famous blacksmith didn't blame him but instead gave him 2 healing potions. Consider it a gift of goodwill from a friendly neighbor, hoping he would continue to use products from her familia. Then bid farewell. In the small room where Hestia lived, she didn't hesitate to bow and kneel, earnestly hoping Hephaestus would forge a special weapon specifically for Bel, the child she always wholeheartedly protected. Despite the rejection at the previous banquet still echoing, the small goddess persisted in her plea, regardless of the others' confused gaze. To show her sincerity, she used a skill once taught by another deity, hoping to move the most renowned blacksmith in Arario. Deep down, Hestia understood that Bel was walking on a path full of dangers, where even a small mistake could cost him his life. Until now, he had always given her the most precious things: trust, loyalty, and unceasing effort. Therefore, Hestia wished to personally create a weapon that could illuminate that path. Not just a fighting tool, but also a symbol of the hope she had for him. Even as a guardian deity, she felt insufficient to bear that sacred responsibility. A helplessness that made Hestia's heart tighten. Understanding Hestia's sincerity, Hephaestus finally accepted her request. However, this renowned blacksmith still maintained her principles, even for a close friend. The price of the weapon remained unchanged. The little goddess had to pay in full. Even if it took centuries, no long-term debt was allowed. Despite the strict conditions, Hestia felt extremely grateful. Because even though she couldn't use sacred power, having Bel obtain a weapon created by Hephaestus herself was invaluable. At her forge, the goddess blacksmith began pondering how to create a perfect blade for a novice adventurer who had just started his journey 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, Bel was preparing to enter the dungeon when he was unexpectedly called by a cat race maid. She handed him a wallet that Sir had forgotten. Since it was a holiday, Bel was asked to return the wallet to her at the festival. When Riwu Lion, another employee of the tavern, explained that the Monster Philia Festival was being held, he somewhat understood the situation. It was an annual event organized by Gainsh's Familia, where adventurers would demonstrate their ability to tame monsters in front of a large audience at the arena. At that moment, Loki and Freya were having a secret conversation. Loki began to suspect that Freya had her eye on a child belonging to a small familia. Although knowing the situation could lead to trouble, Freya still showed interest, determined not to miss her target. As for Hephaestus, after completing the special dagger, she carefully tied it up and handed it to Hestia to take home. The goddess could do anything she wanted with the weapon, as long as she didn't forget to pay her debt on time. At that time, Freya had already set her sights on a boy who was lost in the depths of despair. With just a subtle push, that subject could break. However, in his weakness, there was always an unusual purity, a color that the goddess of beauty had never seen in any other soul. Without revealing the identity of her target, Freya quietly left the party to prepare her own plan. Amid the bustling atmosphere of the festival, Bel finally happened to meet Hestia again. Reunited after many days apart, the small goddess couldn't hide her joy. She pulled Bel everywhere at the festival, treating it as an unofficial date. The two enjoyed cake in an open field while chatting happily. Bel offered Hestia his portion of cake and even gently wiped a cream stain from the goddess's cheek. His pure soul could hardly bear this sweet happiness. However, behind this peace, a plot was being orchestrated by Freya. In the monster holding area prepared for monsterphilia, some had been manipulated. A giant gorilla suddenly appeared, charging straight toward Hestia. Recognizing the danger, Belle quickly grabbed her hand and ran into an area with more complex terrain to evade. Nevertheless, the creature easily caught up, threatening to attack the goddess. Although terrified, Belle couldn't let the most important person to him get hurt. He bravely rushed forward, using his weapon to directly attack the monster's head. But the blade shattered due to the too strong counterforce. With no other option, he threw a light bomb that temporarily blinded the gorilla, then pulled Hestia to escape. Knowing that escaping was just a temporary solution, Belle actively led her to an iron gate. After letting the goddess pass through, he locked the gate from the inside, asking her to leave immediately. Even though Hestia begged him to come back, Belle stood firm in his decision. He couldn't accept losing a loved one again, especially when his family now consisted of only her. Many years ago, Belle received terrible news from villagers about his grandfather being attacked by monsters when he unfortunately fell into a deep chasm in the dungeon. Due to the treacherous terrain and dangers lurking everywhere, no one could venture in to search for him. The pain of losing a loved one deeply imprinted in the young teenager's memory prompted Belle to make a bold decision. He left his remote village to come to Arario, where the giant labyrinth existed, with the aspiration to become a real adventurer. However, dreams don't easily become reality. Despite possessing a resilient will, Belle wasn't accepted by any familia. They didn't want to shelter an inexperienced youngster who was both weak and lacking experience. During what seemed like a hopeless time, fate suddenly smiled when goddess Hestia opened her arms, accepting him as the only member of the familia she established. Back to the present, at the arena where the Monsterphilia Festival was taking place, Ganesha, the god hosting the event, received urgent news. Some people responsible for managing the monsters had been attacked with a strange sleeping drug, causing them to lose consciousness on the spot. Despite deep concerns for people's safety, Ganesha chose to continue the festival to avoid panic, while secretly sending people to investigate. Being a god who always put the audience's smiles first, he immediately requested help from other familias in the city. At that time, Belle was trying to hold off the giant gorilla, a creature just released from the dungeon, with a severely damaged spare knife. Meanwhile, Hestia continuously sought opportunities to approach him to deliver the weapon engraved with a special seal. This wasn't an ordinary weapon but a knife capable of resonating with the owner's stats. Upon contact with the chosen person, it would immediately bond and grow with them through each battle. At the Adventurers Guild headquarters, Asphi Andromeda, Hermes' assistant, was informed by colleagues that a herd of monsters was moving toward the west gate. Immediately, a call for support was issued, regardless of which familia the adventurers belonged to. Coincidentally, Ise Wallenstein, the renowned swordswoman of the Loki familia, had just appeared nearby. Without hesitation, she quickly rushed to the front line, decisively eliminating each monster in a clean, thorough manner, leaving no openings. While Ise dominated the battlefield like a war goddess, Belle found himself in a desperate situation. He was cornered by the gorilla, backed against a cold stone wall, his feet having nowhere to run. Nevertheless, his heart was filled with relief knowing Hestia had escaped the danger zone in time. The scene before his eyes reminded him of the nightmare he once experienced when facing the Minotaur, where he had no chance to resist. Half hoping to see Ise one last time, Belle also felt relieved that she wouldn't see him in this pathetic state. At that moment, Hestia unexpectedly appeared in the middle of the battle, attracting the gorilla's full attention. Sensing the critical situation, Belle immediately rushed forward to embrace the goddess. Both rolled down the stairs below to avoid attacks from the enraged creature. Although Belle earnestly requested her to leave this place to ensure safety, Hestia remained resolute. If he chose to protect her, she also wanted to do the same. Belle's departure would mean their sacred promise would never have a chance to become reality. Despite being constantly pursued, Hestia's face showed no fear. On the contrary, she felt a strange happiness being protected by the one she loved and running together amidst surrounding dangers. After a while of escaping, Belle discovered a secret door behind a large rock. Without hesitation, he pulled her inside to hide. In the cramped space of the old tunnel, Hestia proposed a solution. Instead of continuing to avoid, Belle should directly confront the gorilla. She would take the opportunity to update his status, helping him have enough strength to fight. Although wavering at the thought that he wasn't strong enough to harm the opponent, Belle held firmly onto the faith Hestia had in him. He had dreamed of standing on par with Ise Wallenstein, the strongest swordswoman in Arario, so this challenge couldn't make him falter. Finally, Hestia gave him a jet-black dagger, a weapon specially crafted for Bel, a work of art forged by the god Hephaestus herself. She called it the Hestia knife. The weapon not only embodied strength, but also symbolized the strong bond between him and the only protective goddess in his life. After completing the task of clearing the monsters around the Monster Philia festival area, Eyes Wallenstein suddenly received urgent news from a citizen. A young adventurer was being chased by a silverback gorilla in the maze of small roads behind the festival area. That location was known for its complex terrain, making it very difficult for pursuit forces to access. While others continued to chase, Eyes suddenly felt something unusual. Her instincts prompted her to immediately change direction without hesitation. Elsewhere, the memory of the conversation between Hestia and Hephaestus flooded back into the goddess's mind. At that time, the legendary blacksmith commented that the Hestia knife was a masterpiece specifically for those who had just embarked on the adventurer's path. However, from an artisan's perspective, creating a weapon that evolved according to the user's development went against the crafting philosophy. Hephaestus refused to forge any more like it. Nevertheless, Hestia remained deeply grateful for the kindness her old friend had shown her. Now in the narrow tunnel, Hestia gently leaned her head against Bel's back, as if to provide reassurance before the life-or-death battle. The newly updated power helped Bel's stats grow at an incredible rate. When rushing out to face the monster, he easily avoided each attack, and even just adopting a defensive stance had already caused the opponent's iron chains to crack. This was largely due to the special dagger, a strange weapon that constantly increased in power alongside its wielder's growth. Trusting absolutely in both the weapon and himself, Bel began to move agilely around his opponent, his feet nimble as if dancing on the battlefield. A precise slash broke the silverback gorilla's hard helmet. Then he jumped high into the air, quickly grabbing a clothesline stretched across the path. When the line was fully taut, Bel released his grip, plunging down at an incredible speed, delivering a powerful slash that pierced through the thick armor. Before the opponent could regain composure, Bel continued to circle around it, causing the beast to become severely disoriented. When spotting a small opening, he immediately delivered a fatal stab straight to the heart, ending the fierce creature's life in an instant. The battle concluded with resounding applause from the witnesses, including Hestia, who was hugging Bel with pride. Eyes' face showed clear joy seeing the young boy from before now able to fight more resiliently than before. Although everything seemed fine, Hestia suddenly fainted in Bel's arms, causing him great concern. From a secret observation corner, Freya smiled with delight watching the battle, while also expressing expectations for the next encounter. Reports from the Adventurers Guild confirmed no serious casualties. However, the perpetrator behind everything remained a mystery. The true purpose of the manipulator had yet to be determined. While waiting for the investigation, Hestia was allowed by the tavern owner Mia Grand to rest in a private room on the second floor to recover. She was actually just exhausted after a long, stressful day. When the two were together, Sir Flova confided to Bel that the recent events made her feel guilty for inadvertently dragging him into trouble, all because she forgot to bring her wallet. Nevertheless, she couldn't hide her happiness witnessing the moment Bel bravely plunged into danger. During their farewell, Sir smiled gracefully then gently returned to work, leaving Bel still dazed, wondering whether those words were sincere or just a cute joke. A slight noise in the room signaled that Hestia had awakened. Bel quickly entered to check on her condition. In their intimate conversation, he mentioned that all remaining monsters had been cleared by Eyes. However, what puzzled Bel most was the origin of the strange knife bearing Hephaestus's symbol. Hestia proudly confirmed it was an authentic product, not a counterfeit sold in night markets. Although uncertain whether it was exactly the type Bel had gazed at in front of the forge shop, she was sure of one thing: only one such blade existed in this world. To help Bel become stronger, Hestia was ready to exceed all limits, because to her, that child was not only someone she wanted to protect, but also someone she truly loved. Moved by this sentiment, Bel hugged the goddess tightly, as if seeking support in the arms of the one who always sacrificed for him. In another area within the dungeon, a young supporter girl was enduring mistreatment from a cruel adventurer. He looked down on her, treated her like cheap merchandise, and didn't hesitate to use her as bait when surrounded by monsters. A sense of helplessness was evident in the small girl's eyes as she was pushed deep into the darkness of Aurelio's underworld, where human hearts were scarier than monsters. News that Bel had explored alone up to the 7th floor of the dungeon with stats qualifying for promotion stunned Ina Tull, his direct advisor. While reviewing the status board, she discovered some information was blurred and couldn't be read clearly. However, the basic stats still met the requirements to be ranked in level E. Nevertheless, Ina couldn't feel at ease letting him continue adventuring alone like that. Instead of letting him act as he pleased, she arranged to meet the next day for a special trip together. When dawn broke, Bell couldn't hide his surprise seeing Ina appear in casual clothes, far from the professional look seen daily at the guild. Her fresh, energetic appearance made him almost not recognize her. After a light moment of teasing to ease Bell's tension, Ina took him to one of the most famous weapon shops belonging to the Hephaestus familia. He slightly panicked, knowing he didn't bring enough money. Nevertheless, Ina still pulled Bell inside to introduce him to professional equipment, which was essential if he wanted to advance further as an adventurer. Before going deeper into the higher floor areas, they strolled through the market, where various precious items were displayed with exchange values up to hundreds of thousands of volleys. Just then, Bell accidentally discovered Hestia working part-time at one of the shops. Ina quickly introduced herself as Bell's advisor, as well as an employee of the guild. Under Hestia's probing gaze, she gently denied any personal interest beyond job responsibilities. When reaching the area where many young blacksmiths displayed their first works, although prices were more comfortable, quality was still guaranteed as they had been practically tested. Hephaestus's reputation wasn't just based on value, but also reliability. Bell's eyes lit up when he saw a white armor set placed in a hidden corner of the shop, with the handprint and signature of the forger. Although somewhat expensive, he expressed his desire to own it. Ina didn't prevent him but gently advised that if he wanted to explore deeper floors, he should soon form a team, especially having a supporter accompanying him. Although not making any immediate commitment, Bell kept that advice in his heart. Before parting, Ina surprisingly gifted him a piece of equipment as encouragement. She wanted Bell to accept it as an older sister placing faith in her little brother's efforts. For her, the adventurer profession was inherently unstable, full of dangers, and no one could be certain they would return safely after each trip. Therefore, she didn't want to just stand by and do nothing. Those words, though directed at Bell, somewhat reflected her silent selfishness, wishing to keep him around, even if just a little. On the way back, an unexpected event occurred when Bell was bumped into by a small girl running away from someone following behind. Without hesitation, he drew his weapon, ready to defend, although he wasn't clear what was happening. Before the situation escalated, Ruo, the serving staff from the tavern, suddenly appeared, stopping it just in time. She warned that she didn't want to resort to violence, because whenever she did, she tended to go a bit overboard. The strange man then retreated, leaving Bell confused, not yet understanding what had happened. Looking around, he realized the little girl from before had also disappeared. Rui reminded him that if Bell wasn't careful, Serp, a close friend, would be very sad. The next morning, Bell excitedly put on his new armor. After saying goodbye to Hestia, he set off for the dungeon. While still on the way, a strange little girl approached to chat. He quickly recognized the person who had bumped into him the day before. The girl pulled down her hood, introducing herself as Lilaruka Ard, a member of the beast race, not a dwarf as Bell had initially mistaken. His innocence made Lily find it amusing when he unconsciously touched her soft beast ears. The two sat chatting by a fountain. Lily expressed her desire to become Bell's supporting companion in explorations, as she was facing financial difficulties and desperately needed work to continue surviving. She admitted she couldn't ignore seeing a lone adventurer like him having to overcome all challenges by himself. Although initially hesitant, faced with Lily's sincerity and circumstances, Bell agreed to let her accompany him on upcoming trips deep underground. In the gloomy basement floors, Bell focused intensely on eliminating swarms of monster ants gradually approaching in waves. Each of his slashes carried astonishing accuracy and power, giving enemies no chance to retaliate. At a safe distance behind, Lily meticulously observed the surroundings to ensure no unexpected dangers suddenly appeared. She couldn't hide her admiration witnessing Bell fight so flexibly and effectively. Part of that success, she thought, surely came from the dagger he used, the special weapon gifted by Hestia, containing powerful magic deeply hidden within. After collecting the magic stones dropped from monster corpses, Lily softly asked Bell to help get one more stuck up high, as her small stature couldn't reach it. That afternoon, at the guild headquarters, Ina Tal, Bell's advisor, explained more clearly about the organization Lily had once belonged to. The Soma Familia was known for exploiting the dungeon for commercial purposes. Not only producing wine, they also operated monster hunting activities in an almost industrial manner. Nevertheless, what troubled Ina was the soulless eyes of most members in that organization. All seemed bound by something invisible, as if voluntarily plunging into a deep darkness with no escape. Bell disagreed with these suspicions. He believed Lily was a good person, always willing to help, and contributing significantly to helping him earn a considerable income after the trip. On the way back, Ina suddenly noticed Bell's dagger had disappeared. That seemingly priceless weapon was now being cheaply valued at just a few coins, because outwardly, the blade appeared to have lost its combat capability. This made Lily quite confused. She had witnessed Bell easily tear through monster armor using this very dagger. As if by instinct, she carefully hid the knife in her sleeve in case someone recognized it. However, when passing by the hostess of Fertility Tavern, Lv1, the mysterious elf-blooded server, suddenly called out. With her sharp eyes, she recognized the object hidden in Lily's sleeve looked very familiar. When Lily tried to deny it, claiming it was just her personal item, Rue immediately expressed doubt, as she had known only one person who used a weapon with such special seals. Without waiting for a reaction, she surprisingly tossed a coin that made Lily trip, causing the knife to fly out of her hand. Immediately, the little girl tried to flee the scene but accidentally bumped into Belle at a nearby street corner. Witnessing Lily in a panicked state, Belle worriedly asked what was happening, then was surprised when Ryu appeared with his dagger in hand. Emotions welled up as he grabbed the elf's hand and expressed sincere gratitude. Only when the weapon lay in its true owner's hands did the strange light reappear on the blade, as if confirming the connection between object and person. Before leaving, Ryu revealed she had found this weapon in the hands of an unidentified dwarf, words that added mystery to the atmosphere. Right after, Sir Flova, Ryu's close friend, stepped closer to remind Lily that if she continued living like an abandoned child, she would never find a way out for her life. That advice made Lily silent for a long time. Meanwhile, Bell couldn't hide his joy after retrieving his weapon. He invited Lily to continue exploring the next day. The little girl emotionally thanked him, feeling that she had finally found a place to belong. The next morning, both continued their journey exploring the dungeon. To avoid repeating the weapon loss incident, Bell carefully attached the knife to his inner arm for absolute safety. Since the team consisted of only 2 people, Lily refused to accept the money divided as per contract. According to her, as long as Bell was serious with his efforts, it was enough for both to achieve good results. That day, thanks to their coordinated teamwork, they earned more money than a team of 5 people of a higher level, an unimaginable achievement for a newly formed rookie group. When dividing the rewards, Bell generously gave Lily a portion larger than his own. The little girl surprisingly asked why, thinking he would keep most of the profit for himself, as that was what most people did. However, Bell just smiled, believing that without Lily, such results would never have become reality. He hoped they could stand side by side for a long time, continuing to fight together. Lily looked into Bell's eyes and silently took his hand. During that time, the guild began to worry about the increasingly frequent appearances of disruptive Soma Familia members. Ina, who cared about Bell, became more concerned about Lily's possible connection to suspicious activities. Meanwhile, Eyes Wallenstein's exploration group was busy conquering many deep floors. And Freya, the goddess always observing from afar, began to nurture the idea of creating a new event to test Bell. She brought out an ancient book, hoping Bell would soon discover the energy sleeping deep within himself. Hestia was so bored that she invited the goddess Hephaestus for a drink to relieve her feelings. Her sadness didn't come from anything significant, but simply from feeling abandoned when the person she cared for gave all his attention to other girls. The more she drank, the more her emotions overwhelmed her to the point she couldn't control her behavior, hugging her friend in a drunken state and speaking coyly, putting the other god in an awkward position. The next morning, Bell, still maintaining his usual innocence, carefully took care of Hestia, who was lethargic from the aftereffects of drunkenness. Although she was still angry that he was always concerned about others without caring about her feelings, when she heard him suggest they have dinner together to thank her for all the good things she had done for him, Hestia brightened up as if reborn. She excitedly prepared her outfit, agreeing to meet at the central square in the evening, considering this a real date. Before the appointment time, the goddess went to a bathhouse reserved for deities to relax. When other goddesses heard that Hestia was preparing to go out with a young man, they gathered around, both inquiring and teasing. During this time, Demeter, goddess of harvest, curiously asked what made Hestia so moved. Hestia didn't hesitate to reply that everything about that boy made her heart flutter. At the square, Bel had arrived on time, waiting with undisguised nervousness. Around him were couples holding hands affectionately, which made him feel awkward. When Hestia appeared, wearing a tight-fitting dress that showed off her small but attractive figure, Bel could only stand there staring. Just as it seemed the date would progress romantically, suddenly a group of curious goddesses arrived, wanting to see the face of the person who had made Hestia so infatuated. Seeing Bel was truly a cute young man, they competed to express their fondness. Demeter even boldly pulled him into her warm embrace, making Hestia unbearably angry. Unable to let Bel fall into the hands of those lustful goddesses, Hestia immediately pulled him away, running through many streets. After an exhausting chase, they finally escaped, sitting to rest under the city's bright lights. Although not as expected, the date ended with laughter. Bel secretly hoped there would be another opportunity to invite her out again. Hestia also prayed that day would come soon. At the same time, elsewhere, Lily was in a difficult situation. As a member of the Soma Familia, she was constantly bullied by thuggish adventurers from the same familia, unreasonably forced to pay money. They didn't hesitate to assault her, trampling on her dignity, then leaving with cruel satisfaction. However, Lily tried to remain calm because her biggest goal hadn't been achieved. In her heart, she still nurtured the intention to steal Bel's dagger, the weapon Hestia had given him, as it was part of her plan to escape the oppression of the Soma Familia. At the Adventurers Guild, Ina Tool and her colleagues were discussing why members of the Soma Familia were increasingly sinking into despair. Despite having a stable income from wine, they behaved as if forced to live in perpetual misery. During a deep venture into the dungeon, Bel unexpectedly faced danger when attacked by a horned demon rabbit. He was pushed into a defensive position, almost unable to retaliate. In that perilous moment, Lily quick-wittedly activated a magic sword, shooting a stream of fire directly at the attacking monster, creating an opportunity for Bel to counter and eliminate the enemy. After everything calmed down, Bel expressed immense gratitude for that brave action, especially when he learned she had to use a precious weapon that could only be used once. While having dinner after the trip, Lily timidly asked for a day off because she had to attend a mandatory meeting at her familia. Although this meant violating their previous agreement, Bel didn't blame her but showed understanding. He even said that if she needed rest, she just needed to tell him. This kindness made Lily's heart waver even more, as no one had ever been so gentle with her. Afterward, as usual, Bel stopped by the tavern to thank Lv1, the maid who had silently helped him many times. During the conversation, Lv1 revealed that she often read books in her spare time. She also lent Bel a magic book that a guest had forgotten, so the young man spent his whole day off reading it. Many ancient writings in the book seemed to hypnotize Bel's mind. The more he read, the more engrossed he became to the point where he seemed to hear an inner voice whispering in his head, awakening childhood dreams, aspirations to possess powerful fire magic, to become a great hero who could have everything he wanted that night. While conducting the usual status check for Bel, Hestia accidentally discovered something completely unexpected. When she saw the text indicating magic ability appear on the status board, she was so stunned that she fell backward. This seemed even more surprising than when Bel had defeated a Minotaur alone. The person who had once dreamed of using magic like all real adventurers now finally possessed that ability. In the young man's mind, emotions overflowed, joy clearly visible on his face. The magic he received was named Firebolt, a type of explosive attack of the fire element. Unlike ordinary magic that typically requires time to chant before casting, the ability Bel just acquired didn't require any incantation at all. The text concurrent casting on the status board confirmed this. Instead of wasting time waiting like everyone else, he could cast spells almost instantly, a superior advantage in combat. Although Hestia instructed that he should wait until the next day to test its actual effectiveness in the dungeon, Bel couldn't suppress the excitement rising within him. That very night, he secretly left the inn, heading straight to the first floor of the dungeon alone. In the dim space with only flickering light from the remaining magic stones, Bel stood in the middle of the long stone corridor, raising his hand to release fireballs, feeling the powerful energy released from his body. The continuous bursts of firebolt made him feel as if he was living according to his former ideals. However, being new to using magic, he couldn't control the mana consumption, resulting in his body quickly becoming exhausted. After a series of spell casts without proper rest, he collapsed onto the cold ground, unconscious right in the middle of an area of the dungeon that hadn't been cleared yet. Fortunately, at that moment, Tiona and Eyes Wallenstein, two key members of the Loki Familia, were on their way back after a punitive expedition in the deep floors. When passing by, Eyes quickly recognized the collapsed person as the young man who had once been caught up in the chaos with a minotaur caused by her group. Carrying a sense of guilt, she decided to take Belle out of the dungeon as a way to make up for the past mistake. While still in a dreamy state, not fully awake, Belle felt a warm hand gently stroking his hair. Thinking he was dreaming amidst distant memories of deceased loved ones, he unconsciously called that person by a familiar name. Hearing this, Eyes only gently responded, without anger, and softly stroked his head once more. When he fully regained consciousness, Belle's face turned red with extreme embarrassment, realizing it was all real. Hurriedly getting up and frantically leaving behind a perplexed Eyes watching his figure gradually disappearing into the night. As for Hestia, the next morning, she decided to read the magic book that Belle had borrowed from Sir. Although not thinking it had anything strange, after scanning through it once, she discovered a truth that made her head spin. This was a rare spell book, possessing a mechanism that made its content disappear after the first reading. The characters now showed only white blanks. This meant that this book, which was originally as valuable as or even more than high-end equipment from the Hephaestus Familia, had now lost its value. When Belle learned of this, he froze. The next morning, Belle went to the tavern again to apologize. He wore an awkward expression, feeling guilty towards her, but that maid just giggled without any blame, as if everything was not worth worrying about. The tavern owner was so displeased that she immediately threw the book into the trash, muttering that the fault clearly belonged to the person who had forgotten it earlier, not the young boy. Belle, feeling the intense glare, quickly retreated from that place, asking permission to return to the dungeon to continue practicing. In another corner of Arario City, Riveria, a veteran mage of the Loki Familia, was being whined at by her own deity, who was coaxing her to buy a rare type of wine. Although uncomfortable, Riveria still spent her own money to buy it in exchange for some necessary information. Through the conversation with this cunning goddess, she learned an important fact. Members of the Soma Familia didn't actually worship their god. The only thing they craved was the divine wine produced by Soma, which had the ability to make users completely dependent. At the same time, Belle accidentally discovered Lily Ruka in a disadvantageous situation. One of the people who had once tormented her appeared, trying to approach Belle with a proposal to collaborate in order to seize all of the dwarf girl's savings. Belle firmly refused. His resolute attitude made the other person angrily leave. When Lily approached, she saw the two had just been talking, but when she asked, Belle just said it was nothing important. Although not saying it out loud, her eyes clearly showed disappointment. Without waiting another second, she silently left, continuing to enter the dungeon as if nothing had ever happened. Lily Ruka had once been a child carrying deep wounds from the past. During a time when her parents participated in an exploration of the dungeon to make a living, they never returned. Abandoned in a cruel world, Lily, then too young to fully understand the harshness of fate, was forced to find ways to survive on her own. With no other choice, she began accepting support work for adventurers. Instead of receiving sympathy or fair treatment, she was continuously oppressed, beaten, and exploited by those who only saw her as a tool. Despite having escaped many times, those who had once taken advantage of her still pursued her at all costs, wanting to seize what they believed belonged to them. It was these dark experiences that formed in Lily a hard-to-fade resentment, especially toward adventurers, whom she saw as symbols of all cruelty in the world. On a drunken night, the goddess Loki, known for her eccentric personality, revealed some things about the Soma Familia, where Lily was affiliated. According to Loki, the wine produced by this familia was of such high quality that just one sip would make the user feel lost in a trance. This wasn't a product sold publicly but only distributed internally. The children in the group didn't worship the god Soma. Instead, the only bond between them was that wine, a spiritual drug that once tasted, was very difficult to give up. It was for the goal of tasting the wine that many in the group were willing to betray teammates, deceive loved ones, and even sacrifice lives if it brought higher benefits. Those who contributed more to wine production would have the opportunity to taste a bit. This made greed grow increasingly over time. After revealing everything, Loki happily left, using the excuse of updating Eyes Wallenstein's status. But the actual main purpose was to touch the soft skin of the famous swordswoman. That night, at the dwelling of the Hestia Familia, Belle had told the whole story related to Lily Ruka, the girl he was cooperating with. When hearing about the group of adventurers who had once tormented her continuing to follow, Hestia couldn't hide her worry. However, she maintained a cautious attitude because the person mentioned was a supporter of unclear origin, with a shadowy past, making the goddess more suspicious, especially the detail about the magic dagger once specially forged by Hephaestus for Belle suddenly disappearing while collaborating with Lily. She believed it wasn't natural for those people to attack an ordinary person. There must be something hidden deep inside. Nevertheless, Belle still firmly defended his stance, asserting that one shouldn't rush to judge Lily without clear evidence. The next morning, Lily proposed that she and Belle proceed to the 10th floor of the dungeon to earn more income. She believed that with Belle's current magic ability combined with combat experience having reached the 11th floor, both were fully capable of conquering this area without facing major obstacles. Nearby, Ina Tal, the advisory staff at the guild and also Belle's guide, was hesitating about whether to prioritize work duties or learn more about his new support girl. While still pondering, she happened to meet Ise Wallenstein, who was also on her way into the temple to train. Deep inside the dungeon, Lily couldn't hide her feeling of luck being able to accompany Belle. Although sometimes his actions were somewhat bold, she still expressed her desire for him to use the large magic dagger to fight against monsters with large bodies. Seeing the logic in this, Belle carefully hid the weapon in his backpack before setting off. Meanwhile, Ina sent thanks to Ise for having saved Belle from the clutches of the Minotaur before. The blonde swordswoman initially thought Belle was afraid of her, but Ina quickly explained that on the contrary, he had always been grateful to her from the bottom of his heart. During the conversation, Ina shared her growing concerns about suspicious activities from the Soma Familia and hoped Ise would help if there was an opportunity. Back to the journey exploring the 10th floor, Belle couldn't help but be curious about the new scenery. The enemies this time were large orcs, usually using wooden clubs as weapons. Despite possessing overwhelming strength, Belle still courageously moved forward. In an intense battle, he had to use Firebolt twice to defeat one of them. While searching for Lily, he discovered a specialized item used to lure monsters, which made him extremely cautious. Before he could investigate carefully, a group of orcs, up to 7, simultaneously approached, forcing him to fight in a surrounded position. From above, Lily silently observed. Taking advantage of Belle being distracted by the fierce battle, she used a hook line along with a bow and arrow to retrieve his weapon bag. In her mind, this action didn't stem from malice, but was the only choice after learning all the information from someone who had once cooperated with her. Lily's final hope was to be able to take advantage of the chaotic situation to escape the dangerous predicament. Although this meant she would turn away, leaving behind someone who had once placed trust in her, Belle was surrounded on all sides by fierce monsters, 7 large and bloodthirsty orcs. Meanwhile, Lily Ruka, the small supporter carrying a sense of guilt, had run quite a distance away. In a hidden place, she silently chanted a spell to remove the familiar beast ears disguise she often used to conceal her identity. A part of her small heart felt remorseful when recalling the sincere look of the young boy, someone who had treated her unlike any other adventurer. However, Lily Ruka still firmly believed that her decision was completely justified. After all, Belle was just a part of the cruel world she always hated. Not having time to think much more, Lily Ruka stuffed the small dagger into her boot, then hurriedly left, hoping to escape the grip of the Soma Familia, an organization she had been bound to for too long. But before she could step out of the danger zone, a cruel adventurer, someone who had once colluded to manipulate her, blocked her way. He didn't hesitate to deliver a brutal blow that made the little girl collapse in the middle of the cold stone corridor. He had guessed her plan beforehand, so he had set traps blocking all exits. Those who had once cooperated with him were also present, not hesitating to snatch Lily Ruka's coat, which concealed the precious magic sword. When the drama ended, the 3 Soma Familia members immediately revealed their true colors, no longer maintaining the cooperative facade as before. They ordered the other man to put down all the spoils and get out of there. According to the explanation, many wounded mutant ants would send signals to call their kind. If the conflict continued, sooner or later the whole group would be destroyed. The man had to swallow his anger and leave in frustration. One of the 3 remaining, the one considered the team leader, approached Lily Ruka and coldly presented a condition: just hand over all assets, and he would let her go. With no other choice, she gave out her bank key in exchange for her life. However, even after obtaining the valuable item, the man still didn't release her. He lifted Lily Ruka high and threw her right into the middle of the ant swarm. Using her as bait to distract the monsters, creating conditions for escape. Betrayed, exploited to the extreme, Lv1 could only blame her bitter fate. In desperation, she tormented herself, wondering why the supreme deities let her become a weak, helpless child in this bloody world. She couldn't stop silently blaming herself for betraying the only person who had ever been kind to her, the boy with white hair and eyes that always lit up when seeing life. At the most critical moment, when the chittering legs of the monsters surrounded her small body, a bright red beam tore through the space. Bel appeared without hesitation, casting firebolt, burning each terrifying creature to rescue Lv1. Elsewhere, Eyes Wallenstein, warrior of the Loki familia, had intended to warn the boy and Hestia about the danger level of this support girl. However, the goddess Hestia understood that for Bel, such advice no longer had meaning, because from the moment he reached out to Lv1, he chose not to let go. Although the enemies overwhelmed in numbers, Bel still fought resiliently to protect the small girl. After eliminating the monsters, he mentioned that before leaving, a stranger had eliminated a group of orcs for him. However, due to the thick fog, he couldn't identify who it was. Without wasting time, Bel immediately proceeded to a deeper area to search for Lv1. However, contrary to expectations, Lv1 wasn't grateful, but angrily threw the weapon to the ground, shouting out criticisms. She confessed everything, from lying about the money exchanged from magic stones to cheating on the prices of items, even manipulating emotions to take advantage of kindness. She considered herself like the most despicable person, always making up stories and betraying others' trust. Nevertheless, Bel only gently replied that the reason he saved her was simply because she was a girl, a reason that made Lv1 even angrier because of its superficiality. But he continued, saying that Bel actually didn't care about those mistakes. He believed that if she encountered difficulties, she should speak up, because he wasn't a smart person and wouldn't understand if she kept hiding things in her heart. Those simple words made Lv1 burst into tears, hugging tightly the person she had betrayed, continuously apologizing. After that event, Bel returned to the shop to apologize to Ina Tull for losing the arm guard she had given him. But instead of scolding him, she smiled simply because he had returned safely. A few days later, while the group was resting at the guild, Bel asked Lv1 if she was looking for an adventurer. If so, what a coincidence, because there was an inexperienced apprentice here who really needed a reliable supporter. Lv1 smiled, gently took Bel's hand, and nodded in agreement to accompany him on the next adventures in the deep dungeon. Under Freya's satisfied gaze, Bel increasingly showed brilliance and exceptional growth compared to before. However, for him to progress even further, Freya believed that the fear deeply embedded in his mind needed to be completely washed away. So, she delegated this responsibility to Otter, trusting that the reliable leader would thoroughly complete the mission. On the way back, Bel was quite playful, continuously asking questions that made Lv1 feel embarrassed. Currently, she was still maintaining a transformation spell to hide her true identity, deceiving people in the Adventurers Guild that she had perished in a previous exploration. Although appearing strong, Lily carried a heavy feeling of regret for having betrayed the person who had always treated her kindly. Yet Bel still showed tremendous generosity, advising her not to torment herself too much. Then kindly invited her to stay temporarily at the church where he and goddess Hestia lived. Stepping into that sacred space for the first time, Lily couldn't help but feel nervous about meeting a real deity. While Bel went to the back to prepare tea, Hestia seized the opportunity to directly confront the small girl. The goddess's eyes became stern as she set an important condition. From now on, Lily must absolutely maintain her loyalty, never deceive or hurt Bel again. Lv1 bowed her head and vowed, committing from the bottom of her heart that she would never repeat the mistakes of the past. Although accepting this promise, Hestia still maintained a cautious attitude. In her heart, she still had many doubts due to the multiple betrayals before, not to mention that Lily once intended to claim Bel's heart as her own. So, the goddess left a serious warning: if she truly wanted to prove she had changed, actions would demonstrate it most clearly. When Bel returned with 2 cups of tea in hand, Hestia quickly embraced him as if declaring ownership. This gesture made Lily unwilling to be outdone. She also hugged his arm in response. Neither girl was willing to back down, even ready to confront each other despite the divine status of the other. Bel was so embarrassed that he found an excuse to leave the church to go to the Adventurers Guild. There, just as he entered the hallway area, he unexpectedly discovered Eyes Wallenstein talking with Ina. Feeling it wasn't appropriate to interrupt, Bel hurriedly turned to leave with an awkward feeling. However, his hastiness caused him to bump into a muscular warrior and fall forward. Eyes quickly intervened to prevent conflict, but accidentally let Bell land with his face touching her bottom. Ina showed displeasure at Bell's thoughtless action, leaving on his own without notice. Meanwhile, Eyes gently returned the arm guard piece that had been lost in the battle on the 10th floor. So, it was the blonde swordswoman who had saved Bell from the orc monsters in the thick fog that day. After bowing to apologize for letting the Minotaur escape, causing Bell to suffer injuries, Eyes heard him insist that the fault didn't lie with her. On the contrary, Bell felt he needed to apologize for always appearing weak and constantly retreating. Witnessing the two exchanging sincere words, Ina silently felt happy that Bell could confidently communicate with his idol. Before leaving, Eyes didn't forget to praise Bell's exceptional progress in being able to reach the 10th floor in such a short time. But Bell still felt himself too inferior, no different from a rookie who had just started. Eyes quickly realized that Bell had never been formally trained, with no one teaching him from the beginning. Therefore, she offered to guide him in training as a temporary teacher. The next day, they went up to the watchtower to prepare for the first training session. Eyes borrowed Bell's knife, then casually swung a few moves as if dancing with a sword, then suddenly asked him about the standard combat stance. Before he could answer, Bell was kicked straight in the face by her. When approaching to apologize, Eyes received a modest reply that she had done nothing wrong. He simply lacked experience and needed time to adapt to the combat rhythm. Throughout the session, Bell showed great seriousness, quickly getting into a ready position. This made Eyes not spare words of praise. According to her, just by becoming more alert, Bell would know how to fight effectively. The cold swordswoman also shared a rather special thought: fear is sometimes not such a bad thing, because that feeling helps us know how to protect ourselves. However, she realized that Bell was still afraid of something deeper, beyond the usual fear of monsters. When Bell was about to counterattack, before he could make a move, Eyes had already closed in from behind, easily stabbing directly into the chest armor. While he was fighting haphazardly, she maintained calmness, continuously evading and delivering precise hits to weak points. After several rounds of combat, Eyes concluded that Bell lacked both skills and tactics. In the next match, not only did he not improve, but he even exposed more openings, forcing her to knock him out with a tap to the head, ending the first harsh training session. While Bell and Lily were delving deeper into the dungeon, in another area, Otter, the loyal protector under Freya, was still single-handedly dominating among countless monsters, easily crushing each creature without any difficulty. However, he needed to wait quite a long time to find a Minotaur suitable for the strict requirements from his goddess. After destroying the weapon that the creature was holding, Otter threw it another one with the purpose of teaching it how to effectively use the new weapon, to increase the ferocity and skills of this special training subject. At the same time, on another floor in the dungeon, Bell was determined to go further than usual because the next day, he and Eyes would be resting. This made him want to make the most of the opportunity to go as deep as possible. Although not objecting, Lily couldn't hide her curiosity, as she noticed that recently Bell often showed signs of fatigue with many unusual bruises on his body, making her suspect that he was pushing himself beyond limits. When the misty smoke gradually cleared, groups of monsters gradually appeared, crowding in the darkness. Lily quickly shot a series of arrows, creating an opening to help Bell have space to act. Thanks to the harsh training with Eyes previously, the white-haired young man could now handle the situation skillfully. Not allowing the monsters time to organize a counterattack, he successively defeated waves of creatures, showing clear progress. The weaker ones among them, recognizing the power disparity, retreated, merging with another group of monsters commanded by orcs to plan a general attack. Although the enemy seemed more formidable than normal, Bell understood that if he continued to let fear dominate his mind, he would never catch up to the shadow of the girl he longed to reach. Deeper in the maze, Otter's training with the Minotaur entered a tense phase. Under the pressure of brutal attacks, the giant monster gradually became extremely angry. It charged at its opponent with frenzied strength, but Otter only needed to use pure arm strength to break its horn easily. However, instead of ending the battle, he continued to let the Minotaur struggle until it was completely exhausted, forcing it to evolve through pain. Back on the surface, the days of training with Eyes Wallenstein were extremely harsh for Bell. Each morning began with duels where he was always easily defeated by her, often even fainting on her lap after many accurate hits to his weak points. His progress surprised the blonde swordswoman, as the power gap between them gradually narrowed. When asked about the reason for his unceasing efforts, Bell hesitantly confessed that there was someone he had to chase after, a destination he wanted to reach with everything he could gather. Sometimes, in brief moments between training, Eyes even shared with Bell how she slept anytime, anywhere while in the labyrinth. With the experience of a veteran adventurer, she quickly dozed off while Bell sat beside her, unable to fall asleep at all. During those moments, a vague shadow representing temptation appeared in his mind, whispering seductive words that confused him. But at that very moment, the blue image representing Hestia appeared as a mental barrier, pulling Bell back to reality. When the Minotaur trained by Otter reached its highest state of rage, the Guardian's mission was considered complete. That afternoon, Bell and Eyes happened to stop by a stall selling French fries on their way back. Awkwardly, the person at the counter was Hestia. Seeing the scene of him with Eyes in an intimate state, the goddess couldn't control her emotions and immediately rushed over to question. When learning that Eyes would be leaving with her familia for a long journey in just a few days, Hestia was no longer angry about the training but switched to warning Eyes not to influence Bell's feelings. At that moment, in another area, a group of adventurers from the Soma Familia unfortunately encountered the Minotaur that had been upgraded through brutal training. Even though the leader of the group used all the power of fire magic to resist, the monster remained unaffected. In an instant, with a powerful sword swing, it sent that person along with all teammates back to dust. When hearing that Eyes Wallenstein had single-handedly defeated a boss monster on floor 37, a place that typically required a large team with extensive combat experience, Bell couldn't help but feel dejected. Deep in his mind, he constantly compared himself to the image of that girl. Although knowing the distance between them was still far, he harbored an intense desire to shorten each step of that gap, hoping that he could get closer, even if just a little. On a day after training, when his mood was still heavy with pessimistic thoughts, Bell was suddenly hugged tightly by Hestia from behind. Thinking he would be pulled outside to temporarily forget the current pressure, it turned out she wanted him to help wash a pile of dishes because she had skipped work for many days in a row. With a bright and mischievous face, Hestia both apologized and tried to enlist help from Bell. Although surprised, he found this wasn't so bad, as at least his mind would have a chance to escape from the chaotic stream of thoughts. Just then, Rue appeared, expressing her desire to assist him. As a former adventurer, she understood what Bell was going through. During the conversation, Rue shared that defeating more monsters was not the only factor helping someone level up. According to her, to truly progress, an individual must overcome their limits through a sufficiently significant turning point, defeating an opponent clearly stronger than themselves. Although this is difficult for most adventurers, with appropriate tactics and support from teammates, everything can become feasible. She emphasized that building a team not only helps compensate for weaknesses, but also brings true meaning to the journey of conquering the labyrinth, something that a true adventurer needs to understand. Those words awakened Bell, making him realize that to achieve his goal, he must accept risks and not forget the core meaning of the path he had chosen. From that moment, in subsequent training sessions with Eyes, Bell began to show clear changes. Although not yet able to win, at least he could counterattack in a coherent manner. Eyes couldn't hide her surprise at this progress. He bowed in gratitude to her with all sincerity for the training sessions that had lasted throughout the week. In Eyes' eyes shone joy at seeing a companion striving to rise. Although Bell himself still couldn't be sure if he had the ability to keep up with her, the one thing he could commit to himself was never giving up. When the training period concluded, Bell quickly returned, packing his luggage to prepare for the upcoming expedition. Strangely, this time he left home without checking his status board as usual, making Hestia uneasy. This exploration gathered many adventurers, but to avoid congestion in the upper floors, the group was divided into two large teams, expected to reunite at floor 18 before proceeding deeper to floor 50. The final destination was floor 59, an area where no one had set foot in the history of expeditions. While most participants were concerned about strategy and safety, Freya seemed hardly troubled. The only thing the goddess cared about was whether Bell could prove his true capability in the maze, where only strength and will determined survival. Right during that time, Bell and Lily suddenly noticed something unusual in the air. The number of monsters appearing was much fewer than before, and adventurers were almost absent. A sense of unease gradually spread, recalling the memory of when Bell was chased by a raging minotaur. The premonition was not wrong. Right after, a giant creature in the form of a minotaur, holding a weapon in its hand, suddenly appeared on the 9th floor. Belle's body stiffened, and Lily hurriedly pushed him aside to avoid the first strike. In that moment, the small girl lost consciousness, forcing Belle to take her out of the attack range to ensure safety for both. The white-haired young man immediately applied all fire magic to stop the monster. However, his attack seemed to cause no injury to it. Instead, the Minotaur easily counterattacked, knocking Belle into the wall with a terrible blow. Although his body was in excruciating pain, he still tried to stand up, staggering forward to directly face the enemy. Survival instinct told him that if this continued, the outcome would be extremely bad, so he had to find an escape route as soon as possible. Elsewhere, members of the Loki Familia suddenly received reports from injured adventurers about the appearance of an armed Minotaur on the 9th floor. This confused everyone because there had been no news about the existence of such a creature. What worried them most was that the monster was currently attacking a young man with white hair. Immediately, Eyes felt extreme unease. Without hesitation, she left her position in the expedition for someone else to replace and requested a support group to follow her to that dangerous place. Meanwhile, Belle was still struggling to avoid each hammer-heavy attack from the Minotaur. The increasing combat pressure made his mind fluctuate violently. Nevertheless, with a final effort, he drew his long knife, concentrating all his strength to block the immense slashes. But just a few sword swings from the enemy were enough to make Belle stagger backward. Clearly, he understood that if this continued, death would only be a matter of time. In the dark dungeon, when Lily Ruka's consciousness had just recovered, Belle urged her to leave immediately without hesitation. Although the little girl reluctantly wanted to stay, the stern look and loud shout from Belle forced Lily to reluctantly accept retreating. Knowing she was still weak, Belle was determined to keep the giant monster behind. Escaping now became hopeless, because if the Minotaur got past him, Lily would certainly be in danger first. Therefore, the only thing he could do now was to prolong time by defending and dodging as long as possible. The beast lost patience, frantically launching many fatal strikes. A powerful swing from it caused the ground to shatter, dust flying everywhere. In the moment when the opponent lost sight, the Minotaur suddenly broke through the armor, lifted Belle into the air, then slammed him hard to the ground like a cheap toy. Although beaten to a pulp, Belle still tried to crawl step by step, struggling to get up with trembling hands. In that desperate situation, the figure of Eyes Wallenstein appeared again like when they first met. But this time, he didn't want to depend on her anymore. Instead of letting Eyes continue to protect him, Belle actively moved forward, trying to keep himself from falling, pulling her hand away as a declaration that he was no longer the weak boy of the past. He picked up the last knife, then charged to face the Minotaur, despite the power disparity. Viteloga, a member of the Loki Familia, seeing this scene, just slightly smirked. In the beast person's heart, the thought that this child and that monster had a strange karmic connection seemed not to become reality. It seemed the Minotaur hadn't forgotten the white-haired boy from before, so it came all the way to seek revenge. Lily Ruka, in a bloody state, knelt to beg Loga to save Belle. Although her body was enduring pain from wounds, the little girl didn't hesitate to lead the whole group back to help him. Her earnest plea softened Loga's heart. However, what surprised everyone was that Belle, the boy who had once been seen as weak, was now fighting on par with the Minotaur. Just a month ago, Belle was just an inexperienced adventurer. Now, he could directly engage with a superior opponent. For Belle, the aspiration to become a hero wasn't just an illusion. He had gradually painted his own fairy tale, overcoming fear to fight for his ideals. That scene was so beautiful it made Freya go crazy. The goddess's eyes were filled with desire for possession. Everyone witnessing was amazed at Belle's resilient will. However, despite efforts to agilely dodge and continuously use fire magic to control the Minotaur's movements, he still couldn't deliver the finishing blow. The situation became critical when the only long knife broke. In that life-or-death situation, Belle immediately shifted strategies. He took advantage of an opening, rushing to stab straight into the Minotaur's arm, then twisting hard to completely paralyze it. When the opponent howled in pain, Belle didn't miss the opportunity. He grabbed its sword, delivering fierce slashes that caused blood to splash everywhere. Driven into a corner, the Minotaur finally lowered its center of gravity, launching a final charge like a mad bull. But Belle didn't falter. He used all his strength to cut hard at the monster's horn. Although the sword shattered, he quickly slipped underneath, using his knife to stab deep into its stomach, then continuously pouring fire magic into the writhing body. Under the continuous impact of the scorching magic stream, the Minotaur's giant body began to swell then explode like a fireball. When the dust cleared, only the image of a white-haired young man standing silently in a pool of blood remained, in a dignified and proud posture. Just as members of the Loki familia arrived, Lv1 silently checked Bel's status and discovered all states had reached level S, an extremely rare achievement for a novice adventurer. After that battle, the name Bel received more attention in the exploration world. While he lay unconscious, Hestia, the goddess who had always stood by Bel's side, smiled with tears in her eyes. For her, this moment was the first page of the hero story that both of them wrote together. The next chapter begins with Bel enthusiastically running to the Adventurers Guild to show Ainatul that he had finally reached level 2, a major turning point marking the truly mature journey of the aspiring young man. The beautiful advisor couldn't help but be amazed by this claim. Nevertheless, doubt still existed in her heart, as leveling up in such a short period, less than 2 months, was almost unthinkable for an ordinary adventurer. But the victory over that Minotaur monster would perhaps serve as a special milestone making this miracle happen. As for Hestia, when she learned that her boy had broken through his limits, the goddess appeared extremely excited, but at the same time didn't forget to gently remind him not to be too complacent. Leveling up wasn't necessarily a feeling of bursting power. More importantly, Bel had awakened a completely new skill, Argonaut, something tied to the aspiration of becoming a hero. Upon learning this, his eyes lit up with innocent joy. Hestia could only sigh and smile, believing that the desire to write a fairy tale story remained intact in this kid's heart. Before leaving to attend the regular meeting between gods held in the divine city of Denidus, where titles would be bestowed upon newly leveled adventurers, Hestia didn't forget to instruct Bel to practice more to master the new skill. This gathering had special significance for the entire Hestia familia, as Bel was the first adventurer to reach level 2 in such a short time. This achievement had stirred the entire divine community, causing even reputable gods like Loki to buzz with excitement, especially when compared to Ise Wallenstein, who had taken over a year to advance to the next level. Even the god Hephaestus couldn't help but be amazed when hearing the news. At the ceremony, Hestia was determined to choose a truly impressive title for Bel. However, surprisingly, the chosen name was rather gentle. While Bel expected something more majestic, the maids at the inn showed interest in the nickname because it carried a friendly, cute quality. Not long after, rumors began to spread throughout the neighborhoods around Arario. Most were words of praise, while others remained skeptical. Nevertheless, what Bel had proven through actions was enough to extinguish any unpleasant gossip. That night, Ruu and Sa raised their glasses to congratulate him, although in reality, they had been assigned by Mamma Mia, the tavern owner, to increase revenue by partying with this special guest. Amid the cheerful atmosphere, some adventurers at the next table suddenly suggested inviting Bel to join their team. However, the accompanying conditions seriously offended many of his companions. Ryu, without saying a word, directly dealt with the ringleader with a beer mug, causing his arm to dislocate. When the situation began to tense, Mia appeared. She easily shattered the cheap wooden table, causing the rude group to flee in fear immediately after paying their bill in a trembling state. The next morning, Bel wandered through shops looking for suitable equipment. Despite searching many places, he couldn't find what he needed. While inquiring, a young blacksmith from a nearby shop burst into laughter and claimed to be the author of the armors Bel was seeking. This person introduced himself as Welf Krozo and proposed a deal. He would forge all the necessary weapons for Bel. In return, he wanted to join the team and enter the dungeon with him. Bel nodded in agreement quite quickly, making Lily somewhat dissatisfied. In her eyes, Welf's background was still an unpredictable unknown. Moreover, Bel's actions were too careless, deciding to let a stranger join the group just for a few pieces of equipment. Upon hearing the surname Krozo, Lily immediately changed expression. This family had once been a renowned clan of blacksmiths, famous for their ability to craft high-level magic items. However, due to a mysterious incident, they lost all their skills and slid into hardship. For Welf, that surname now only retained the echoes of a faded glory. Nevertheless, this wasn't the time to argue about the past or judge people by their family's reputation. After reorganizing the formation in a reasonable way, Bel Cranel quickly charged forward to face creatures too weak to pose a threat. Those scrawny monsters were defeated as easily as turning over a hand, almost not requiring him to expend much energy. In fact, with just one well-timed firebolt, Bel could pierce through the hard shells of armored monsters, things that had once been his nightmare in previous explorations. The feeling of mastering skills, plus the newly awakened power, made Bell realize that he seemed to be gradually getting closer to the image of the girl he had always admired. Although that path was still long, this moment was enough to ignite a small hope in the young adventurer's heart. Elsewhere, not far away, Ise Wallenstein and her teammates in the Loki Familia were exerting all their efforts against many upper-level monsters. Their battle proceeded with full spirit, each strike demonstrating skilled technique. It seemed that the impression of Bell still lingered in their minds after their recent encounter. On the 10th floor, the appearance of many different teams began to make the space chaotic. Bell's group decided to withdraw, yielding the battlefield for other groups to handle. Just as they were about to retreat, Bell suddenly realized his arm was showing strange signs. Before he could understand the situation clearly, a young dragon unexpectedly rushed out, frantically chasing Lily Ruka. In that dangerous moment, Bell had to concentrate all his remaining energy, launching a direct firebolt at the monster's head. The strike was so powerful that it collapsed right there, leaving the whole group completely stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. Returning home, Hestia speculated that the new Argonaut skill might have been activated. This skill allowed Bell to deliver a fatal blow when facing pressure from vastly superior creatures. It was a form of power capable of reversing the situation with just one strike. While having dinner with Hestia, Bell happened to mention the Krozo family, a renowned family of blacksmiths with a history of creating many powerful magic weapons. Based on what the goddess knew, that family once possessed top-tier skills in crafting magical weapons. However, their glorious days were now only in the past. One day, because Lily Ruka had to take care of a sick relative, Welf invited Bell to his private forge to create new equipment. However, due to not having a clear direction about the necessary type of weapon, Bell just held a few swords to test the fighting feel. Observing his expression, Welf realized Bell didn't truly understand the purpose of this visit. After a while of conversation, the young blacksmith decided to clarify his thoughts, admitting that he had been testing Bell's heart over the past few days. Welf was very worried that if Bell knew his true identity, he might look at him differently. To express gratitude for being accepted as a real teammate, Welf promised to forge Bell a special sword. The main material was none other than the horn of the Minotaur that Bell had defeated before. Welf had been approached by many customers. However, they only cared about the reputation of the Krozo name and only ordered weapons with magic things that brought temporary power but weren't sustainable. According to him, weapons shouldn't just be tools to achieve glory. Rather, they should be an integral part of the warrior, something always faithful to the user. Unlike magic items that disappear after each use. When the sword was completed, a product Welf considered his greatest passion in his life, he handed it to Bell with a single wish, not to trust immediately, but just to see him as a genuine comrade, like the way Bell treated Lily Ruka. A few days later, the group began preparing for the next trip down into the dungeon. They divided combat positions and developed coordination tactics for maximum effectiveness. In Bell's heart welled up feelings of excitement, because now he was no longer alone. Although not sharing the same bloodline or living under the same roof like other families, the people standing by his side today were his second family teammates ready to combat to the end. A few hours before embarking on the exploration, Bell Cranel put on a distinctive cloak. This was an item chosen based on advice that Ise Wallenstein had once mentioned when talking about venturing into the middle floors of the dungeon, an area much more dangerous than places Bell had previously set foot in. On the way there, Hestia accidentally saw Hephaestus giving her children similar instructions. Both familias were sending young people into danger, making the atmosphere full of worry. Although anxious, Hestia understood clearly that worry wouldn't help in this moment. The only thing a deity could do was trust the children they supported. At the exploration site, Bell, Lily Ruka, and Welf combined forces to handle monsters that appeared suddenly. Initially, the group encountered some difficulties in coordination as each person had their own combat style. However, as time passed, they gradually found synchronization, reacting faster to every wave of attacks. While the three were celebrating a temporary victory with plans to find a resting place, a group of monsters shaped like rabbits, but carrying weapons suddenly charged in. The appearance of these strange creatures made Lily Ruka and Welf inevitably think of Bell, especially the eyes and extremely agile movements. Elsewhere in Arario City, two strangers were inquiring about information surrounding Bell Cranel. However, most of the responses they received were just mockery. Some thought Bell was simply lucky for possessing magic, or merely relying on relationships with the Loki Familia. Even though he had just broken Ise Wallenstein's record, the one regarded as the Sword Princess. Some still refused to accept that reality. Sv Andromeda expressed concern that if they continued to dig deeper into the issue, they might face unnecessary trouble. However, Hermes, who always had his own perspective, patted the girl's head as a way of showing trust. He spoke many words of praise for Sv, who was always a solid support in dangerous missions. With no other choice, Sv agreed to accompany Hermes to the famous tavern to gather more necessary information. Meanwhile, the situation in the dungeon was deteriorating. Bell's group was overwhelmed by the large number of rabbit monsters. In another area, Takemikazuchi's team urgently retreated after one member was seriously injured. On the way back, Mikoto Yamato tried to hold back the monsters chasing from behind. But the situation worsened when a pack of wolves suddenly appeared, forcing the group into a difficult position. In that circumstance, the team leader had to make the decision to cross through where Bell's group was fighting, despite Mikoto's objections. For Aoka, the lives of his teammates were more important than people he had never met. Thus, Takemikazuchi's team brought along the fierce wolf pack, forcing Bell's group to quickly retreat. Although Bell continuously cast Firebolt to push them back, a few still managed to rush in and cause chaos. The battle became more intense than ever. The whole group had to fight against a mass of monsters. Lily Ruka was unharmed thanks to careful protection, while Welf suffered injuries to his arm, though not life-threatening. The three hadn't even had time to breathe a sigh of relief when the next wave of attacks came at an unpredictable speed. That was the moment when Ryu Lion's words about the treachery of the dungeon seemed to become reality. Things that seemed like small problems when accumulated could lead to life or death outcomes. Anyone lacking a stable formation could easily become prey in that underground world. Just as Bell's group was struggling to resist, a new wave of monsters poured down from the cave ceiling. All three couldn't react in time, were caught in the monster stream, and fell to a deeper level. During the violent impact, Lily Ruka and Welf were crushed by boulders, causing serious injuries. Bell was now alone, forced to use all his strength to fight against the wolves that continued to surround him. Too much time had passed without Bell's group returning, causing Hestia to become increasingly restless. The goddess quickly went to the Adventurers Guild to assess the situation. Feeling growing unease, she immediately requested an emergency mission to organize a search for Bell's group. At the same time, Aoka led Mikoto and Chigusa Haimgami to meet Hestia. It seemed they needed to clarify something important that could affect the entire upcoming situation. Although lucky to escape death after the dangerous fall, Bell, Welf, and Lily Ruka accidentally fell down 2 more floors of the dungeon. The reason they weren't burned alive by fire element monsters was thanks to the cloak made from salamander wool, a strong fire-resistant item that Bell had been given beforehand. Despite being in the dark maze for a long time, the group still couldn't find any way up. As things became deadlocked, Welf proposed that the 2 remaining leave first, while he would stay behind because the severe wound on his leg could put them in danger if they kept dragging him along. However, Lily Ruka thought differently. Instead of finding a way back, she suggested that going down to the 18th floor might be more viable for survival. It was a rare safe area in the dark dungeon, a place where no monsters lived. If lucky, they would meet high-level adventurers resting down there and could ask for help to be taken back to the surface. The 3 decided to use the sinkhole on the middle floor to quickly access deeper areas. At this time, the boss guarding the 17th floor had been eliminated by the Loki Familia, so it needed time to resurrect, giving them an opportunity to cross without direct confrontation. Although this was very dangerous, Bell still chose to continue the journey with his teammates. Meanwhile, in Arario, Takemikazuchi came to Hestia's church to bow and apologize. He felt remorseful for his subordinates' earlier actions, pushing monsters toward Bell's team, putting them in a dangerous situation. Although very angry, Hestia didn't blame him further, only hoping everyone would work together to find her child. A search team began to be formed with many experienced people, because the place they needed to go was no longer the middle floors, but the deep area where only those with sufficient abilities could survive. While recruitment was still ongoing, the god Hermes suddenly appeared, expressing his desire to join the journey. Although having only known Bell from a brief meeting in the city, Hermes still showed enthusiasm and proactively nominated Svi, his trusted subordinate, to accompany the group. Faced with such sincerity, Hestia had to nod in agreement. Hermes originally not only wanted to support, but also intended to personally participate in this exploration, even though clearly, a god entering the dungeon was strictly prohibited behavior. When Svi discovered this intention, she could only sigh at the familiar impulsiveness of her master. While they were busy talking, no one realized that Hestia had heard everything. She also was determined to follow to protect Bel because she believed that as long as the blessing she gave him remained, he was still alive. That earnest plea made it impossible for people to stop the small goddess, even though it could lead to major trouble. Before the group departed, the medicine god asked Svi to deliver a special item to Welf along with a discreet message. Feeling the mission becoming increasingly dangerous, Hermes decided to ask Ruu, who was once a member of the Astrea Familia, to join the support team. Although she lived quite privately, Ruu's abilities were enough to make anyone feel secure in battle. Deep in the maze, the three young people were exhausted from hunger, thirst, and continuous encounters with monsters. To drive away some monsters, Lily Ruka had to use a bag containing an extremely foul-smelling medicinal mixture, a type of fragrance that made monsters instinctively stay away. However, that disgusting smell also made the whole group almost unbearable. Just as they crossed an intersection, a giant wolf suddenly rushed out to attack. Without hesitation, Welf used fire magic combined with wind, causing the monster to explode on the spot. Although trying to remain calm, the blacksmith's face clearly showed utter exhaustion. Outside, Freya had early recognized that Hermes was getting involved in this matter. However, she wanted herself to be the only one permitted to intervene in Bel's fate. At the same time, in the maze, when the effect of the fragrance bag had just ended, a large and ferocious minotaur appeared, roaring and charging at the group. Bel immediately rushed forward to attack, incorporating the Argonaut's skill into an extremely powerful slash, defeating all three monsters in a short time. Although that victory helped them escape danger, he gradually felt his body no longer had enough strength to continue. Night fell as the rescue team fully assembled to venture deep into the dungeon. Ruu suddenly appeared, surprising Hestia quite a bit. However, Hermes reassured her that he was the one who had invited her to join. With Ruu's support, the rescue mission for Bel officially began in the gloomy night, where each step could cost a life. Under the pressure of prolonged battles, Bel's group had almost reached their final endurance threshold. Meanwhile, the search party led by Hestia was progressing smoothly thanks to the participation of two exceptionally skilled adventurers. Among them was Svi Andromeda, who held the title of Perseus and was a master craftsman of magical items in this era. Beside her was Rio Lion, the cold swordswoman with lightning-fast movement speed, although information about her was still quite scarce. In an area of ruins from a cave-in, Hestia discovered Bel's weapon lying among the rubble. Recognizing this valuable clue, Ruu quickly climbed to a higher point where she saw magic stones and some potion bottles scattered around. Based on these signs, Svi deduced that Bel's group had lost most of their equipment during their movement and inevitably suffered serious injuries. Wandering in the harsh terrain of the dungeon in that state was no different than waiting to die. Therefore, she believed the group might be heading toward the 18th floor, a safe area where no monsters appeared. That seemingly illogical assessment was unanimously confirmed by Ruu and Hermes. Based on her intuition, Hestia felt something similar, so they immediately changed direction, moving deeper downward. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Welf finally collapsed after depleting his magic power from continuously casting spells. Even Lily Ruka, despite trying her best, couldn't withstand the accumulated fatigue from the long journey. With no other option, Bel had to discard unnecessary items to carry both companions to a nearby hole, choosing the most dangerous option of jumping straight down. On the way to the deep floors, Hestia wondered about the real reason that made Hermes so determined to rescue Bel. In response, the god admitted that someone had once asked him to observe the young man's growth process. However, the main reason still lay in his personal interest. Hermes wanted to witness firsthand whether this boy could open a new era for the entire world. As for Bel, after much effort, he finally reached an area called the Wall of Sorrows. With no time to hesitate, he exerted all his strength to cross the gate, just as the Goliath, the guardian monster of the 17th floor, was resurrected. The giant creature's hammer-like blow collapsed most of the stone floor ahead, sending the entire group falling straight to the 18th floor. When awakening in the vast grassland below, Bel struggled to approach someone who had just appeared to beg for help for his two critically endangered companions, then fainted from exhaustion. When opening his eyes again, the first thing Bel saw was Eyes Wallenstein sitting beside him. In a moment of confusion due to the unexpected closeness, he accidentally slipped and his face fell straight onto the chest of the Sword Princess. This incident made Bel blush deeply with embarrassment. After calming down, he realized that Lily and Welf were also being treated nearby. Eyes reassured him that they were safe because they were being carefully looked after by members of the medical support team. When asked to recount the journey from the time of falling until now, Bell surprised the members of the Loki Familia. For his first time down to the middle floors of the dungeon, he had managed to get past the 17th floor where a notorious monster like Goliath resided. This made them see him with different eyes. Finn Damney, the captain of the team, not only showed respect but also treated all three as special guests. Because if Ice's companions died here, she would certainly not spare anyone. Due to a team member in the Loki Familia being infected by a poisonous monster, the entire group decided to stay on the 18th floor waiting for an antidote. During the rest period, Bell was suddenly intercepted by two female members of the Loki Familia, who frankly expressed their interest. They were attracted by his brave fighting style when encountering the Minotaur monster. Faced with this attention, Bell could do nothing but stammer like a schoolboy meeting his secret crush for the first time, his face turning so red that anyone looking at him had to laugh. After recovering his health and spirit, Bell began walking around the 18th floor, unable to hide his curiosity when witnessing the magical light illuminating a vast area in the heart of the dungeon. Without needing explanation, Eyes Wallenstein silently led him to the center of the area, where many crystal prisms naturally glowed while floating high above, creating a dreamy shimmering scene. According to the cycle, that light would gradually fade, giving way to nightfall. The transition between day and night here carried a mystical quality that stunned anyone witnessing it for the first time. Because of this, adventurers dubbed this floor the Under Resort, a labyrinth that seemed unreal. When the sky turned dark, Lily, Ruka, and Welf gradually regained consciousness after the prolonged exhaustion. Realizing the situation, both immediately bowed their heads, expressing remorse for feeling like burdens to Bell. However, contrary to this thought, Bell believed it was thanks to Lily's courage that he had the reckless idea to jump to the deeper floors. And without Welf, perhaps the whole group would have been torn apart by monsters long ago. Having these two people, though the journey was dangerous, they were able to reach this safe haven. While the three were talking, Eyes entered to invite them outside to enjoy dinner. Before joining the feast, the group politely thanked the Loki Familia, people who had extended help sincerely and without calculation. During the party, Tiona gave Bell a special fruit only found on the 18th floor. When tasting it, the unexpected sweetness almost choked Bell, forcing him to give the remaining portion to Lily. However, the little girl's joy didn't last long, as the fruit piece was quickly snatched by someone else. This incident made Lily so angry, she almost pounded the table. Meanwhile, Bell wasn't faring any better as he continued to be targeted by the duo in the Loki team. They didn't hesitate to tease him for his impressive performance against the Minotaur. Sweating profusely, Bell didn't know where to hide, especially fearing that Eyes would misunderstand. Just then, he heard a familiar sound coming from afar. His instinct told him something important, and he immediately rushed outside, where Hestia had just run up to embrace him tightly in tears. Relief was evident on the goddess's face when confirming that Bell was still alive and well after all the ordeals. Not only Hestia, but also people from the rescue group had arrived safely. Hermes cheerfully shook Bell's hand, saying that thanks should not be given to him but to the person who spared no effort, defying dangers to search for him. Inside the tent, Yamato Makoto bowed her head to apologize to the entire team for her hasty actions earlier. Chigusa Aoka, who had made the wrong decision, took full responsibility for the incident. However, despite the mistake, he believed the choice he made wasn't completely unreasonable. Welf maintained a stern attitude, unable to let the matter go so easily. He was surprised that Aoka could utter such words in the current situation. Amid the tense atmosphere, Bell intervened with sincere sharing. If in a similar situation, perhaps he would have acted like Aoka to protect his teammates. Seeing the sincerity from both sides, the tension gradually subsided. However, whether everyone was truly satisfied or not remained uncertain. The next day, Asfi Andromeda, on behalf of the group, announced that the plan to return to the surface would be carried out after the Loki Familia finished eliminating the Goliath occupying the 17th floor. This meant they would have one more day of rest before the journey continued. During preparation, Tione Hurut, a member of the group, gave Welf a weapon forged by Hephaestus herself, along with a private message for the young blacksmith. Night fell peacefully as Bell quietly left the tent, directing his gaze to the crystal-speckled sky. In the moment of admiring the strangely serene scenery, he unexpectedly met Eyes again, who was also walking outside. Before Belle could ask why, Eyes calmly said she felt something uneasy, so followed to check on him. Belle wanted to say he was very happy to be with her, but the pent-up emotions made him speechless, only able to force an awkward smile. Eyes suddenly suggested inviting Belle to visit the small town within the 18th floor tomorrow. Just as he was happily accepting, Hestia stepped out from afar, unable to hide her irritation at seeing Eyes inviting her boy when she knew nothing about it. The small goddess grumbled while turning to blame Eyes for not asking her permission before planning to date Belle. Meanwhile, Welf sat alone by the firelight, immersed in thoughts about his decision to no longer create magic items. Although verbally saying the choice couldn't be changed, deep in his heart, he still grappled with a sense of regret. It was like this now, but no one knew what the future would hold. Perhaps at some point, he would be forced to face that choice again, not for personal glory, but to protect those around him. Although she was the one who actively proposed the trip, Hestia quickly became exhausted because the journey to the town on the 18th floor was longer than she thought. It was only thanks to Belle, who both supported and continuously comforted her, that the goddess could drag her feet to the destination. When they set foot in the town, the scene that unfolded surprised more than a few people. What caught everyone's attention was the presence of monsters right on this floor, something very rarely seen. Eyes Wallenstein even called this place a paradise for dungeon creatures because they not only didn't attack people, but their appearance was also extremely special, carrying a strange beauty never seen on the upper floors. This town was built long ago by a group of veteran adventurers, but over time, it didn't maintain the splendor as rumored. Most structures here had deteriorated, with some areas in ruins, no longer intact. Nevertheless, the living costs here were unbelievably high. Belle was about to go find Hestia when he accidentally bumped into a group of people who had previously caused trouble at the tavern. The leader tried to spark a new conflict. However, upon realizing Belle was accompanied by Eyes, he immediately shrank back, clearly showing defeat, then left in embarrassment. Not long after, Hestia excitedly showed the group a bottle of perfume she had just bought. Although the fragrance was pleasant, Lily immediately criticized it because the money spent was not commensurate with its actual value. A small argument erupted between the two, making the atmosphere awkward. Hestia immediately tried to justify by asking Belle if he disliked girls who sweated a lot. It was because of this debate that the female members of the group decided to go take a bath to relax. During this time, Hermes suddenly appeared and quietly told Belle he had something to discuss privately. He immediately pulled Belle away from the camp, deep into the forest, and climbed onto a large branch. Hermes demanded silence for fear of being discovered, while warning that if the female group caught them red-handed, they wouldn't be at peace with them. The god Hermes affirmed that men's peeping behavior, though judged as sneaky, was like a manifestation of a feeling called romance. Just as Belle was about to object, he unfortunately slipped and fell straight into the bathing pool. This unexpected accident made two girls bathing nearby notice Belle's presence, immediately approaching to tease him. Despite trying to stay calm, Belle couldn't avoid the awkward situation. Sv was the only one who realized the person who had incited Belle was Hermes. As the situation became uncomfortable, Belle turned his head intending to run away, but couldn't resist peeking once before leaving. After running around in circles, he realized he had lost his way. While trying to find his way back, Belle happened to hear the sound of trickling water and following it, encountered Ruo soaking in the water. She immediately sensed someone was watching and launched a warning attack, causing Belle to panic and bow his head in admission of guilt. After hearing his explanation, Ruo didn't punish him but showed understanding. Belle worried she would remember this incident and silently resent him. But unexpectedly, she paused, gently advising that humility was a valuable virtue. But if it turned into an action of self-deprecation, then it was no longer a good thing. Belle heard this and blushed with apology, while thanking her for coming to rescue him. In fact, Ruo had intended to visit this forest before because it was a place she frequently visited. The tavern owner occasionally gave her time off to visit the graves of her former teammates, people who had once fought alongside her in her previous team. Back then, a hostile familia had set a trap for the entire team, leaving no survivors except her. After avenging by eliminating all enemies, Ryu sank into a feeling of emptiness, once intending to give up her life in a dark alley corner. It was at that moment that Sir had reached out to pull her from the depths of despair. Despite knowing Ryu's bloody past, the tavern owner decided to accept her, allowing her to continue living and working there as a family member. When reaching this point in her story, Ryu felt guilty for suddenly sharing such a sorrowful tale. She always thought of herself as a failed spirit, bearing heavy hatred, even capable of betraying Belle's trust at any moment. Hearing this, Belle couldn't contain his anger, demanding she never say things that hurt others like that. Although appearing stern, he still showed a humble attitude, feeling that he had spoken out of turn. Ryu said nothing more, only silently stepping forward to take Belle's hand, confirming that he was one of the few people she truly respected and trusted. Under the dim moonlight of the 18th floor, while many others were enjoying sleep, Hyacinthos, the leader of the Iclos Familia, sat alone with a face red from alcohol and irritation. In his heart burned anger because he hadn't found a way to humiliate Belle Cranel, the rookie who had recently gained fame for eliminating a mutated minotaur. While his mind was spinning in frustration, unexpectedly, a stranger appeared, speaking vague words as if having some plan already in mind, making Hyacinthos interested in collaborating. The next morning, Batiloga, with an annoyed appearance, loudly reprimanded Belle for accidentally seeing eyes in an inappropriate situation. Seeing this, the twin sisters of the group had to intervene, pulling Loga elsewhere to ease the tension. Although the matter was handled gently, Belle's heart was still filled with emotions. Not long after, the Vanguard team received orders to set out to explore deeper floors. For tactical reasons, Eyes had to lead the formation. Before parting, Belle smiled gently, wishing her good luck. But that action unintentionally made Hestia hot-faced with jealousy. The goddess immediately took out the newly bought perfume to attract attention. But before she could do much, a stranger using invisibility techniques came to kidnap her. Returning to the camp, Belle discovered a letter left on the ground. After reading its contents, he quickly ran away like the wind. On the way passing by where Auka was practicing swordsmanship, the warrior frowned upon seeing Belle's panicked expression, immediately realizing something serious was about to happen. In the letter, the kidnapper demanded that Belle come to the Crystal Tower in the east alone if he wanted to bring Hestia back safely. As soon as he set foot there, Belle was intercepted by Hyacinthos. He presented the condition of a one-on-one match, with the prize for the winner being the right to decide the loser's fate. Hyacinthos' real purpose wasn't to rescue someone or demonstrate justice, but to humiliate Belle in front of a crowd. Although understanding the risks, Belle still accepted the match to protect the person he cherished. When the battle began, Hyacinthos immediately used a tricky move. He slammed his sword down on the stone floor, causing countless crystal fragments to fly everywhere, hitting Belle's eyes, making him dizzy. And before he could regain his senses, he took an unexpected punch. Even when trying to react, he was completely overwhelmed by the opponent's invisibility ability, a magic item that turned Hyacinthos invisible. This was an item Hermes had secretly given him with a different purpose in mind. Esphi stood from afar watching the match, not without suspicion about Hermes' real motives. Meanwhile, Hermes appeared calm, viewing Belle being beaten repeatedly as a necessary lesson for him to understand the dark side of the adventurer world. Thanks to Esphi's accurate deduction, the remaining teammates arrived in time to help. A chaotic battle quickly broke out, forcing the kidnappers to withdraw some people to cope, thereby abandoning Hestia, who was tied up alone. Lily Ruka seized the opportunity, transformed back into human form, and followed the lingering perfume scent to find where the goddess was being held. She cut the ropes, successfully rescued Hestia, and together they went to support the group. Although the enemy outnumbered them, the tide of battle still favored Belle and his teammates thanks to their coordinated teamwork. During the chaos, Welf accidentally lost his weapon when the binding strap was cut. An enemy rushed in to subdue him. However, Ruu appeared just in time, delivering a precise punch that rendered the man unconscious. She then coldly finished off the remaining one, stopping the danger in time. While the battle was fiercely unfolding, Belle, despite being covered in wounds, began adapting to Hyacinthos' invisibility technique. He used crystal fragments to reflect light to detect movement direction, gradually avoiding hits from the enemy. Not stopping there, Belle cleverly counterattacked by flinging glass fragments into Hyacinthos' eyes, causing him to be exposed, then cutting the opponent's weapon in half. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he delivered a powerful punch to the face, knocking him down on the spot. Although the Hades magic item was no longer effective, Hyacinthos stubbornly charged forward hoping to finish Belle. At that critical moment, Hestia activated her divine power. The light emitted was so strong that it caused the entire Iclos Familia to flee in panic. Hyacinthos also had to retreat with the excuse of having to care for his parents. After the battle, Hestia burst into tears and ran to hug Bel tightly, both happy and regretful because it was her impulsiveness that nearly cost him his life. While the two hadn't yet calmed down, the ground suddenly shook. From above, a gigantic shadowy figure appeared, causing all eyes in the group to turn toward it, full of amazement mixed with anxiety. At the bottom of the 18th floor, a place that seemed temporarily peaceful after the incidents, Hermes' words made the atmosphere heavier than ever before. According to what he shared, the dungeon, an ancient entity imprisoned since primordial times, was gradually revealing its anger accumulated over a long period. It wasn't just a place where monsters were born, but it seemed that the dungeon itself was a living creature, carrying the resentment of being eternally confined in darkness. In a brief moment, many crystal prisms around cracked, light flashed, and then suddenly extinguished, signaling that something ominous was about to happen. Immediately, a gigantic thing fell from above as if being ejected by the dungeon itself, a Goliath. The infamous floor boss now appeared abnormally in a place that wasn't its own floor. It roared with excitement, the sound echoing and causing all monsters in the forest to instantly become ferocious and attack the adventurers present without following any rules. Bel was about to rush in to support those who were surrounded. However, Ryu blocked his way, seriously asking if he had thought carefully about sacrificing himself for strangers. Nevertheless, Bel didn't hesitate, deciding to step into the danger zone. Although seen as immature in his role as a leader, his choice this time stemmed from his benevolent nature, unable to ignore the suffering of others. At that time, in the forest being devastated, small groups of adventurers were almost in a state of despair. They were surrounded by monsters and the Goliath, completely lacking the ability to hold out. Gareth, a veteran warrior of the Loki familia, though showing signs of fatigue, still tried to fight until the last second. At that moment, Bel appeared like a saving wind, cutting through the stream of beasts, creating an escape route. Lily Ruka immediately pulled Gareth to a safe area, not forgetting to emphasize that he should be grateful because others didn't leave him behind. As for Eyes, as soon as she grasped the situation, she quickly returned to the small town on the 18th floor to summon all adventurers and mobilize the pre-stored weapon arsenal. All escape routes had been completely blocked, and the only way to leave this place was to eliminate the Goliath, the one causing unprecedented chaos. Finn, the leader of the Loki familia, had no choice but to throw all remaining forces into the battle. Meanwhile, Ryu, quick as lightning, closed in and delivered a precise sword strike to the leg, causing the monster to stagger. Mikoto and Isfi immediately provided support. However, the Goliath's steel-like thick skin made all efforts seem futile. Thrown back by the counter-force, they could only try to struggle back up. Just as the Goliath was about to deliver a crushing blow to everyone, a magic arrow crafted by Welf flew in, pushing back its power. Although the monster's face was seriously injured, its ferocity hadn't diminished at all. Ryu realized that the enemy before them wasn't an ordinary floor boss, but might reach the level of a deep floor leader. Asfi glided across the battlefield, announcing that reinforcements from the town were gathering, and the mages were preparing to deploy powerful spells for a coordinated attack. To allow the spells to be successfully chanted, she and Ryu took on the responsibility of distracting the monster, extending the time as long as possible. While Isfi attracted attention, the adventurers poured all their equipment, from bows and arrows to swords and spears to magic items, to push back the Goliath. However, despite their coordination, the monster still resisted frantically. Finn, in an unexpected situation, was thrown far away but fortunately survived thanks to Welf's shield, which blocked the destructive pressure. A touching scene appeared when those who were once strangers from different familias now stood shoulder to shoulder against the common disaster. Nevertheless, the Goliath's strength far exceeded expectations. Bel, while using the time to rescue the injured and bring them to Welf, immediately returned to the battlefield, focusing continuous attacks on the monster's legs, making it roar in pain. Finally, when the spell was completed, Finn ordered simultaneous firing. Multiple beams of light and fire from high-level magic descended upon the Goliath's body, creating an enormous explosion that seemed enough to end everything. However, the boss unexpectedly rose, using its extremely powerful regenerative ability to restore its body in an instant. It roared, delivering a devastating slam that shook the entire ground, causing most nearby adventurers to be knocked back, with only Bel remaining standing firm. Ryu and Isfi continued to engage the monster to maintain the battle's rhythm. While Bel handled the surrounding monsters to clear the area for the mages, their goal was to maintain enough time for the magic to be prepared again. In the chaotic scene, Bel's Argonaut skill suddenly activated, creating a new opportunity. Lv1 cleverly directed everyone to gather weapons, increasing damage for the next attack round. Ryu rushed in close to the Goliath, delivering a series of sword strikes that penetrated its defensive layer. Although the blows had clearly caused injuries, the core magic stone, the monster's life essence, had not yet been broken. The Goliath suddenly changed tactics, attacking randomly everywhere, causing many people to be injured or even collapse on the spot. Nearby, Oka, a warrior who had been insecure due to past failures, resolutely took a shield from a comrade. Despite objections, he stepped forward to the front line, no longer wanting to be someone who always hid or lived under the shadow of others' sacrifices. Under the dim light of the 18th floor of the dungeon, as the Goliath, a monster far beyond all normal limits, began to change its attack direction, Bel, without hesitation, immediately cast Firebolt combined with Argonaut, delivering a direct strike to the monster's head. However, the enemy didn't fall as expected. Instead, it laughed ferociously, releasing an extremely powerful shockwave that threw him far away. Even so, it didn't stop with its terrifying regenerative ability. The Goliath regenerated in the blink of an eye and then swung its large arm down. In that life-or-death moment, Oka appeared just in time, using all his strength to block the blow, minimizing damage to his friend. Although both suffered severe injuries, that sacrificial act created a precious opportunity for the adventurer group to deploy emergency treatment. Behind them, Hestia, with a trembling heart, prayed that the gods would hear her wish. Lily also silently watched, continuously whispering hopes for him to wake up. In his daze, Bel's mind drifted between reality and vague images. In the darkness of his subconscious, he heard someone's voice speaking words not meant for proud swordsmen or warriors, but for those who dare to risk their lives for others. Facing dangers, even if the result is failure, as long as one maintains determination, one day victory will smile. The desire to protect loved ones lit up in Bel's heart once more. From the smoke that hadn't yet cleared, he struggled to rise, each heavy step moving forward with the weapon that Lily had given him. The blade in Bel's hand seemed to reflect his unyielding will, reactivating the Argonaut skill along with all burning wishes. The Goliath felt uneasy in the face of the rage being awakened from its opponent. It quickly mobilized all remaining monsters to block the young man's path. The adventurer group immediately stood up, joining forces to form a protective ring, determined not to let any creature touch him. Ryu moved at high speed, simultaneously chanting a spell to slow the boss's advance. Mikoto concentrated all her strength to prepare a powerful magic attack, while Welf hastily sought to retrieve the weapon he had dropped earlier. Sv created wings with magic, gliding through the air and cutting straight into the Goliath's eye, causing it to howl in pain, temporarily losing sight on one side. Ryu quickly deployed the luminous wind technique, creating a series of magic bullets fired continuously at the target, making it more furious than ever. The Goliath counterattacked, knocking Sv away, then grabbed Ryu, intending to throw her. However, Mikoto had cast her supreme technique, the War God Barrier, binding the monster's body. Although the barrier's pull was very strong, she still couldn't hold firm for long, so Mikoto had to let go. At that moment, Welf threw in his magic weapon, unleashing Flame Moon, causing the Goliath's body to burn in a sea of fire. The flames rose brilliantly, but then the sword also shattered, forcing the blacksmith to leave the battlefield. Each passing second was a moment of survival. That precious time was enough for Bel to gather all his strength, wrapping himself and his sword in pure light. He charged forward under the hope-filled eyes of all adventurers, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. The fatal attack radiated like a dazzling dawn tearing through the dark night. But it still wasn't enough to defeat the enemy. Without hesitating another second, Bel immediately jumped down, drawing his knife to stab directly into the magic stone deep within the Goliath's body, its true heart. The flesh tore apart, each muscle segment of the monster gradually melting away with the light of justice, signaling the end for the giant creature. When the battle closed, everyone burst into emotion. Hestia stepped forward to confirm this glorious achievement, proudly declaring Bel, the grandson of the god Zeus, as the true hero to be praised by posterity. This victory not only saved all the adventurers, but also wrote a new chapter in the legend of those who had ventured into the dungeon. After everything, Bel's group returned amid cheers echoing throughout the city. Although each person still carried their own feelings, when the blood stopped flowing, they together held a grand feast, enjoying a rare moment of peace. And Bel, the young hero, finally got to rest, peacefully drifting into sleep in the gentle arms of the goddess who had watched over him from the beginning.